My friends, Eric Andres, your Guitar Sage here, and today we're going to be talking about steel string guitars versus nylon string guitars. We're going to learn the differences between them, the similarities. We're going to learn about some caveats, some things to do, some things not to do, so stick around. Okay, so starting off the show here, we've got the Ortega R121. This is a really fine nylon string guitar from a great company, and in a nutshell, a nylon string guitar is similar to a steel string guitar in its size or in its scale, if you will. But there definitely are some differences. So let's talk about the similarities first, and then we'll talk about the differences. So when you chord on a nylon string guitar or on a steel string guitar, it's going to play the same chord. You're going to have the same scales, the same notes, the same chords. All the patterns and all that are all the same. It'd be similar to the difference between playing a steel string acoustic guitar and a steel string electric guitar. The chords and everything in regards to how you're playing the guitar as far as patterns and that sort of thing are all going to be the same. But they are different instruments in the way that you would approach them. In the difference, similarity would be the difference between, say, like a Porsche and a sedan, or a sports car and a four-wheel drive. Yes, they both have tires and they both have a steering wheel and transmissions and that sort of thing, but to say that they're just alike because of those things would be fairly ridiculous, right? Because they feel totally different. And the same thing with nylon string guitars and steel string guitars. The obvious difference between the two is that they have the nylon string guitar has nylon strings and the steel string guitar has steel strings. That's an obvious difference, but let's go into it a little bit deeper. So this is a nylon string guitar, and also known as a Spanish guitar or a classical guitar. Those are other definitions that you'll hear thrown about. And the nylon string is a more stretchy string. It's typically not as loud as the steel string. It's a little bit duller in sound, which I'm going to have some playing examples at the end of this video for you to hear, playing the same bits and pieces so that you can hear the difference between the two. But you can hear it's a more mellow type sound. It's a little bit darker, not quite as bright, and not quite as loud. Now, in regards to the guitar itself, you'll find that the body is going to be a little bit different. Usually this is the classic nylon string, classical Spanish style body. And it's just this, usually there's no cutaways, where you can reach your hand up the bout. That's just, it is what it is. As opposed to a steel string that's going to have, oftentimes it might have a cutaway, maybe a bigger body. So that traditional classical guitar has that standard body. The neck is typically going to be wider, and that is to help when you're playing classical guitar, flamenco, Spanish style guitars, you typically have to play chords that are a little bit more complex than the standard open position chords that you would play in folk music or country or rock. So, and because of that, we have to have more finger space where we can reach and do some intricate bits and pieces, okay? So the neck is literally wider this way, okay? The thickness of the neck, and that would be from, this part right here, is going to depend on each different model, but the thickness, the width is definitely wider on most nylon string guitars. In fact, I've never met a nylon string guitar that did not have a wider neck. You'll also notice on the guitar neck of nylon strings is that oftentimes you won't see any fret markers. Now you will see them on the top here, but usually you will not see them on the front of the fretboard, and that's just tradition again. The tuning pegs are usually this style here where the tuning pegs come behind the neck and you've got the post going in between. That's just a classic style, and oftentimes the tuners are open, the gears are open. The nut on a nylon string guitar is cut specifically for nylon strings and not steel strings. Also, most classical guitars or nylon string guitars do not have a truss rod in them. This Ortega R121 does have a truss rod in it, and some classical guitars or nylon string guitars will have that, but most do not, because the pull, the tension from the headstock to the bridge is not that of a steel string guitar. Somewhere around 100, 110, 120 pounds of pulling pressure. It's different for nylon string, and that's why typically there's not a truss rod needed. A truss rod is a rod that runs within the neck that bolsters the neck, that makes it stronger, and it can also adjust the arc of the neck. And again, this R121 does have that. So, with that being said, in regards to the nut, that's something that's often asked to me. People say, Eric, can I put steel strings on my nylon string guitar? Can I put nylon strings on my steel string guitar? Usually it's the other way around, because folks have a nylon string guitar and they want to play a steel string guitar, and they say, can I do that? In which I will always answer, no, no, do not do that. It's a very bad idea. So if you're thinking about doing that, do not do that. Get a steel string guitar. It's not going to be the end of the world, except it may crack your neck, okay? There's a good chance that it's going to break your neck because of the pull, or it's going to arc the neck in such a way, bend the neck in such a way that it's going to make the guitar fairly useless. So you don't want to do that. The other reason being is that the nut, this is called the nut, and this is where the strings lay in before they get to the tuner, that's cut specifically for the thickness of nylon string guitars, or nylon strings, I should say. And nylon strings are much thicker than steel strings. Now, you'll notice that the first 3 strings here are just nylon, and then these look like they're steel, but in fact, it's nylon covered by a thin layer of steel, but it still is a different feel than a straight up steel string, and again, they don't pull as much as a straight up steel string would. So there's nylon inside this with a little bit of steel on the outside, which creates the sound that we're looking for on a nylon string guitar. So in regards to like the playability and that sort of thing, again, it's going to have a different feel, and the approach that you would take on the nylon string guitar is typically a finger picking approach. So you're doing this sort of bit instead of big heavy strumming. If you're doing any sort of strumming on the nylon string guitar, it's typically not going to get the sound that you're wanting. It'd be like playing a classical guitar or an acoustic steel string guitar and playing it in an electric manner. It's like you can do that. You can play those same licks and those same songs, but it's not going to give you that same feel that you're looking for. Maybe like taking a 4x4 on a fast track, or taking a Porsche on a bog and trying to use it that way. It's like technically you can do that, but it's probably not a good idea. Okay, so in regards to all the music theory, all that stuff is the same, and in regards to the differences, you've heard the differences there, including the strings that allow you to, that don't allow you to bend. That's something else that I need to mention there, is that the strings don't allow you to bend. They roll underneath your finger on a nylon string guitar. Not so much on the steel string guitar. So let's check out the steel string guitar. So this is a steel string guitar, and you can see that just the look of it is different. The body is quite a bit bigger. The scale length is the same, at least in the case of these two guitars. The scale length is the width, or the length, I should say, of the bridge to the nut. And that's going to be similar. Now the neck, we said, is a little bit thinner. Or actually it's standard, and the neck on a nylon string is actually wider. You can see, well now this particular guitar does not have fret markers on the front either, just like our nylon string, but honestly that's very rare. Every other acoustic that I've ever owned does have the fret markers on the front, and in this case you do have them on the top here as well, but that's just this particular guitar, and sometimes you will run into that. Something I didn't mention in the nylon string guitar is oftentimes you will have pegs that you can attach a strap to, whereas you wouldn't typically do that with a nylon string guitar because you're playing it in a different way. Usually a folk guitar or steel string guitar is played on the right thigh if you're right-handed, and a classical guitar is typically played on the left thigh if you're right-handed. So the reason being is that you're typically grabbing chords that are more intricate and what have you. That's why we have the wider neck on the nylon string, and that's also typically why it's played on the left thigh. I cover that in detail in my posture video in the free course at YourGuitarSage.com/30. The link for that is below. It's my top 30 lessons that I teach all my students. So if you want to check that out, I go into a lot more detail about how to hold the guitar and the whole 9 yards. So typically for the folk position, you're going to hold it like this, and you're going to hold it underneath your arm like this to some degree. You're just holding it in place. You're not really grasping it, but that's the basic idea. Now, the steel strings are louder, and they typically lend themselves to both finger picking and strumming with a pick or a plectrum. So you can hear we have a very bright sound. Very bright sound, very loud sound. That's what we get from steel strings. And you'll notice that the tuning pegs are different and that the posts are coming straight out as opposed to the classical that was going across. Again, let's talk about the nut. The nut is specifically cut for steel strings. If we were to put nylon strings on this guitar, it would be fortified enough because there is a truss rod, and they're 99.9% of the time you're going to have a truss rod in a steel string guitar. So it could hold the nylon strings as far as the strength, but again, the strings are much thicker, and so instead of them resting inside of the grooves of the nut, they're going to rest on top, which means that the action is going to be higher because the strings are going to be a lot higher away from the fretboard, which it's going to make it harder to play. The intonation and tuning is going to be wonky. You don't want to do it. Steel string guitar, put steel strings on it. Nylon string guitar, put nylon strings on it. Okay, now again, we said that we could finger pick on this, right? Or we can strum in any way that we want to. It's got that nice country feel or rock feel. It's been used in many different genres, whereas the nylon string typically is used for flamenco music, sometimes jazz, but mainly like flamenco, Spanish style, and obviously classical guitar. So again, the notes, the scales, the chords, everything's the same between the two, but the differences between them here, again, is approach, how you are approaching the instrument. Are you hitting it really heavy? Another thing that I want to say about the strings is the steel strings typically tend to be a lot more, they can take a lot more abuse, so you can really hit them hard and play them for a long time, and they're not going to give you any issues. Whereas nylon strings, specifically strings 4, 5, and 6, the ones that have the nylon core and then the steel on the outside, typically those start fraying over time, especially where the string meets the fret, because remember, here you've got steel with steel wrapped around it. So there's not much for there to be separated there, but when you have nylon and then steel around that, it just doesn't hold the same way, and because of that, you can fret all day long on a steel string guitar and it's not a problem, but on a nylon string guitar, typically in the frets, in the lower frets where you're playing a lot, you're going to find some separation happening, and then once they start fraying, it's time to put new strings on. And in fact, I've literally had nylon string guitars sitting up, on my wall or sitting on a stand where the string will just break with temperature changes and season changes and that sort of thing. So they're a little bit more sensitive, a little bit darker sounding. So, my friends, hopefully you like that. I'm going to give you some playing examples here, but if you like this video, please hit thumbs up If you have any comments or if I missed anything, please leave your comments below. I know there's some folks that know a lot more about nylon string guitars than myself and about steel string guitars. So please, it's a community here. We're all trying to help each other out. So leave those comments below. Let's all help each other out. Again, please let me know how I can help. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all those places. We do lots of giveaways there. We give away thousands of dollars worth of great goodies, guitars and courses and books and all sorts of stuff every single month. So we would love to see you there. Don't forget YourGuitarSage.com/live, where we do live broadcasts every single month. And in fact, we do them every week on Facebook and on YouTube at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time on Thursdays. We try to do that every single week. So my friends, there's tons of great stuff for you. I've got the free course for you. The link for that's below, YourGuitarSage.com/30. The top 30 lessons I teach all my students. Visit me here in Nashville. It'll take us about 30 weeks, or you can just click that link below. All right, let's check out some playing examples. And as always, my friends, be kind to all beings. Practice your guitar. Here we go. Of course, you can't do that at all on a nylon string guitar. So